name is Adrian Nanchev, and this channel is all about helping you become a remarkable entrepreneur. So, click on the subscribe button and press the bell notification icon next to it. So, learn about economics. Economics is very important because the world we live in is dominated by capitalism. You can be as communist or socialist as much as you want, which are more or less the same thing. But the point is, the world operates on capitalism. Everything you see is capitalism in nature. The market, buying and selling things, clothing, books, chairs. This camera is made due to innovations and the profit motive of capitalism. Everything in this house, the device you're watching this video on, everything around you, arguably, depending on where you actually are, if in the forest, not too much, but if you're in a house, in the city, then yes, capitalism built that. Capitalism is a very wonderful form of economic system. And economics is the science of managing scarce resources. Capitalism is like the father, and economics is like the son. Economics is like quantifying things and explaining things, while capitalism is more like, here's the principles, here's the theories. Economics is important to understand as well. When I say economics, I mean key phrases, words and notions. If I talk about Austrian School of Economics, price elasticity, fiat currency, gold standard, FTSE 100, do you know what I'm talking about? These are some key. Inflation, stagflation, or even shrinkflation, or even deflation. These things are important to understand how they apply and how they interact with the world. Also, there's a relationship between inflation and the bond market, which I don't fully understand, and the yield curve. I don't fully know too much about the bond market, but there's a lot of intricacies. LIBOR rates, the rates at which banks borrow and lend money to each other. There's a lot of stuff. So economics, understanding things like price elasticity, is an interesting concept to know in your business, because price elasticity is talking about how when you change the prices of products, raise them or lower them, or raise or lower, to what extent does demand increase for said product? If you lower the price from 10 quid to 5 quid, does demand double or does demand triple? What happens to demand? If you raise the price from 1 quid to 3 quid, does the demand decrease proportionally or disproportionately to said price rise? And inflation, all inflation is really expansion of the money supply. So we're looking at what's called state money and bank money. State money is the printed physical form, and bank money is the on-screen form. Inflation really is expansion of the money supply. Because we have a fiat currency, the central bank can essentially print away purchasing power. They can print off millions and billions every month or year of currency. There's a difference between currency and money, by the way. Big difference. Print off billions of pounds worth and dollars worth a year. So, put it this way, if it started raining tomorrow, golden leaves, on day one people would be out in the streets wanting to try and get as much as they can of it. But after 40 days of raining gold, they'd be sweeping with a brush, they'd be sweeping the gold out of their house because it's so common. Inflation is expansion of the money supply. The more there is of something, the more there is of something in an economy, in this case currency, the less valuable it is. This is why ideally you want a strong pound, strong dollar, with a strong manufacturing industry, because a manufacturing industry reduces the deficit, the trade deficit, and helps to strengthen your currency abroad, where you're a creditor. People are buying your stuff and they're borrowing from you to buy your stuff. And your strong pound means that you have a strong tourism board, meaning that you can people can go abroad, people can afford to go abroad and spend, which counts as an export. If I go abroad and spend money in a foreign country, that counts as an export for me, and it counts as an import for the tourist board over there, because that's money coming into the country. Furthermore, it's worth understanding that productivity is more valuable than debt. Well, there's two kinds of debt as well. There's good debt and bad debt. Good debt is money that I can borrow, I can then spend. Let's say I borrow at 1% interest. and then I use that money, let's say advertisements, and I'm essentially getting a 3% return on said cash, said capital. 3%, 1% goes to the bank to pay off the interest and or the principal, 2% is profit. So that's good debt. This is more like clever finances here, where I can borrow money to make more money. That's how you can profit from debt. Whereas bad debt is what's called consumer debt, where I'm borrowing money from the bank to consume, to buy things, like a television or a holiday or a car. I'm borrowing money to then spend on a consumer good, but then my productivity hasn't increased, so I'm paying off that debt. I say I borrow 100 quid to buy a car, I buy that car, but then that means I got a car which is a liability, repairs, maintenance, fuel, and I got £100 liability expense. I'm actually I'm in a worse off situation. Whereas if I borrow it to increase an advertisement, for example, I'm getting 3% ROI, 1% for the bank, 2% for me, and I can spend that to pay it off or do more stuff with it. So it's worth understanding economics from an entrepreneur perspective with regards to metrics in key performance indicators, things like the price elasticity. That's very important to understand. If you change prices, how will that affect demand? So the question of the day is, what don't I know, or what don't you know about economics? What do you not know? I would like to learn more about the bond market, but that's very low priority, mainly for investing. In the future, it's worth understanding how the bond market works and how it's a good thermometer or a barometer of how the country's economy is doing, as well as understanding how pensions work. When I say pensions, I mean like pension funds or things like annuities. Because although I'm 23, it'll be a long time, depending on what kind of that's another whole conversation, till I retire. But also I don't plan on using things like state benefit, because that's called unfunded liability, and the chances of the government being able to fund my retirement when my generation as well reaches retirement age, let's say age 70, will the government be able to fund these retirements? The chances are no, unless they continue to create more currency, what is called quantitative easing. And this quantitative easing will essentially mean there's more pounds in existence, but these pounds can buy less. Inflation is a very interesting topic, and there's different forms of it. Shrinkflation is fascinating. That's interesting. A little story about that, which I'll have to explain another time. But economics, what don't you know? You've got to understand these phrases. Shrinkflation, inflation, LIBOR rate. Understand how things work. This world is capitalism. Understand how it all works together and how it all fits together. It's fascinating and interesting enough. The next video and in the playlist, 101 mistakes, is about capitalism, and that one is a bit more meaty, because that one, economics and capitalism are similar, but I think capitalism is a bit more important, because economics is just like how to define it. But that's what I want to learn more about, the bond market and pensions, because you understand those, you're a much wiser investor and you're a much wiser citizen as well, because the wealth of a nation depends on citizens' financial acumen. So, what don't you know about economics? And lastly, click on the subscribe button below and press the bell icon right next to it for the latest uploads, and you'll see me again soon. How cool is that?